Welcome to the Omnibus Show, a program for people who are interested in everything, with deep conversations on a wide variety of subjects. And now your host, Dave Gibbs.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Omnibus Show, the program for people who are interested in everything, with deep conversations on a wide variety of subjects. This week's guest is Chris Lewis, who is the executive director of the Songbook Foundation here in Carmel, Indiana, and the Great American Songbook Foundation housed in the Palladium at the Center for the Performing Arts, which shares a vast library and extensive archives with the public to advance the rich musical legacy of the American songbook. He oversees all of the organization's activities, including management of the Songbook Archives and Library, the Songbook Exhibit Gallery, the Songbook Hall of Fame, and all the educational outreach programming. So you do quite a bit.
A little bit.
You run the town is what you do. Well, welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. Whenever there's a conversation about music, I'm always interested.
Yeah,
So
great.
it's great having you here. Well, going back to the beginning, can you tell us a little bit about your adventure into music land?
Sure. And performed growing up and sang in choirs and knew I wanted to perform. I went to school on a music scholarship. I didn't major in music because I was afraid I would end up being a teacher and I wanted to be a performer.
Yeah.
So I went to school on a music scholarship. It was a work study scholarship. So my work was singing, and then I got to take and study whatever I wanted. And so I ended up majoring in communications and then left and performed. And I performed in regional theaters and cruise ships and things like that for about a year, 2 years, and then ended up moving to New York. And I moved to New York and lived there for about 15 years. I did act and sing and got my equity card and SAG card and then I got
So you're the real thing.
well, I don't know about that. But again, I always
If
joke.
you got a SAG card and all of that, and equity, you're the real thing.
Well, and I got those singing, by the way, too. I mean, my SAG card came from singing on movie soundtracks. So it's like I always wanted to be an actor, but I kept getting hired as a singer.
Gotcha.
So I don't know what that says about my acting. But
Says something about your voice.
yeah. And then I got hired to sing in a group called Pieces of Eight, which is a professional vocal jazz group. And I was with them for several years, and we toured the country performing at performing arts centers and universities and schools, and we recorded several albums. And
Did you have a parrot on your shoulder?
we didn't have a parrot, but we did have a secret mascot, which was a parrot that someone gave us.
That's great.
On the road. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. And my wife, who I knew before Pieces of Eight, but she joined the group after I did. And life on the road, we were friends before, but then we got together, fell in love, got together, got married, and the group.
There's a song in it.
Yeah, it must be. And so we got married, and I went back to school and got my master's in education and became a teacher. And so I started teaching history, and I was a special ed teacher as well, dual license in the Bronx in New York. And then we had children, and we're looking to leave the city. And my wife grew up in Indy, and her parents were living in Carmel then, and were keeping us abreast of what was happening here in Carmel and the Center for the Performing Arts. And one night they called and said, they've hired this guy from New York City to be the artistic director. And I was like, okay. And, they said, it's Michael Feinstein.
Turns out it's Michael Feinstein.
Yeah. And what I said to you earlier, it's like in that moment, it was like a light bulb went off in my head. It was, this, I don't know, smashing of all my worlds, because I knew, Michael a little bit personally, and I had been a fan of his growing up and the music, because I grew up listening to the music from the 40s and 50s, and I didn't listen to the pop music of my day. It's what I loved, and so I loved what he did, and I thought, why is he in Indiana? And I looked into it, looked it up, and saw that he had started this foundation, and I thought, oh my gosh, who knew that even something like that could even exist, or there was a need for that. And I could, it's like all of my worlds, my
Here's the phone
teaching,
number.
my music. Yeah. And so I phone number, I started, this is, how long ago it was. I sent letters. I wrote a letter to the executive director at the time. And I said, you've got this great mission that mentions education, but you don't have any. At that point, they had no programs or anything. And I said, I'm a teacher, I'm a musician, and here's how I use music in the classroom. And so I started sending letters with lesson plans and ideas for things that they could do. And when they were actually finally able,
It's a great idea, by the way.
yeah. Well,
It's very proactive.
Well, again, we were looking to leave the city at that point. Our kids were getting to be school age, and we thought life in the city with two small kids is not as much fun as life in the city
When you're married,
before.
you're a couple.
Yeah. And so we were looking to leave the city, but, and I loved teaching. So, I really loved teaching, but again, there was something about this idea and this mission that so connected with me. And, I'd love to say that I had this path and this drive to, this master plan, but I didn't. But I look back now on everything I've done in my life, and it really helps inform what I get to do every day. So yeah, music's always been a part of my life. And then that's kind of the weird journey as to how I got here. And so we moved here in 2011 when the Palladium just opened, and that was the first time the foundation had a brick and mortar home. The foundation was actually created in 2007, but it was run out of a living room before that. So I moved here right almost in the very beginning, and been here ever since.
Fascinating. Well, that's a great story. Thank you so much. Just how everything kind of built on one upon the other. Can we start off by we talked about the American Songbook.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the golden age of pop music. Can you run through the golden age of pop music for us very briefly? Here's your history professor hat.
Yeah.
Just, kind of like, what are some songs, some maybe songwriters, and just a sketch of maybe the decades. And, if you can, just run us through a real brief bullet points, history moments, and any insight that would educate us about this period of time that falls under the Great American Songbook period.
Yeah. Well, I'll start with our definition of what that means, the Great American Songbook, because it has become known as a specific period in time, that golden age. The term, actually, we don't really know where it originated. It really just refers to music that lasts beyond the time that it was written. And so by that definition, it's still being written. There are songs being written today that are going to last 20, 30 years. Sure. Could be Taylor Swift. We don't know. We won't know for 20 years, Dave. So, but if a song is still being sung and reinterpreted years after it was written, it's a part of the soundtrack of our lives. And so by that definition, the songbook is still being written. Our purposes and our charge as a nonprofit and as a research organization and repository is to focus on materials from what's considered to be the golden age of American popular music, or the foundational era. And that is a finite period of time. That's the early 1900s, really about the 1920s through the 1960s. Mm-hmm. And that was a time when there was an explosion. As a history teacher and a history buff, as you'll know, and a history teacher, the golden age refers to a turning point in history. That was a point where music changed. Popular music, that it was something that was created, certainly influenced by any number of things and cultures, but it is unique to America. It started here, and it comes. I'm not a music historian, so I won't give you the lesson plan on exact dates and when. But that it was a time where a lot of this music came out of the theater, came out of what was happening in musical theater, which was changing from operetta and musical reviews to stage shows with plots and songs that drove the plot. Yes. Those songs were written by people like Rodgers and Hammerstein or Cole Porter or Irving Berlin. And then before those shows would open, those songs would be released, to artists to sing and record. Sure. So they were popular before the shows opened. So when audiences went to the show, the songs were familiar, right? that's why a lot of those songs were those what began as theater songs became jazz standards, pop standards.
So there's not really a particular song that would be considered the beginning.
I don't think there's a particular...
just the grouping of the period.
Yeah, because when we talk about songs that last, I think one time we did a presentation on music from the 20s through the 60s. I think published songs, there were something like 250,000, songs, and we kind of mapped the time period in the songs. But for all the songs that lasted, remember, there were scores of 1,000s, so, I mean, it's hard to pinpoint what song, Irving Berlin in the early 20s, you've got Blue Skies was like 1926, so I would say it was that point in time. And we're talking about people like Irving Berlin and Rodgers and Hammerstein and then Johnny Mercer and Hoagy Carmichael and, Dorothy Fields. And I mean, so it was they were the folks that really represent that time. And then they collaborated with each other and then certainly crossed over that 1960s line. But the 20s through the 60s is really the time where the structure of the song, the focus on the lyrics and I think as we were talking about earlier, at that point, the songwriters were the stars of the day. We don't know their names so much anymore, which is another reason why we exist, because we celebrate those songwriters, like Harold Arlen and Gus Kahn and High Zerrett and Alex North, and names that people don't remember anymore, but they wrote some songs that are still relevant today, like Unchained Melody and It Had to Be You and Dream of Me. And so those folks would write the songs, and then the artist, anybody could perform them and would perform them. And maybe a Frank Sinatra or Ella Fitzgerald had, a hit and became defined with the song, but the songs were written by these geniuses and poets, which is another reason why they stand the test of time. I mean, the melodies, of course, were gorgeous and beautifully constructed, and the lyrics were poetry. And so there's a reason why they still last today and are played today and are used today to convey and evoke emotion and love and romance. And we're not hearing current pop music on film scores. We're hearing songs that were written now 50, 60, 70 years ago.
That's true. And also another thing from another angle is a lot of music in America was, you had the old style of music where you had folk music, you had hymns, which you had Southern gospel and that. And then the folk music went to what became the folk genres, and also what became not classical, but country, the varieties. And then all of those type of, and a lot of that came out of the South, but there was a lot of that around the country. A lot of the folk tunes would be, eventually that fed into popular music with the blues.
Right.
And country and what came out of rockabilly and the whole Nashville thing and Memphis. And, all these things started going, but primarily a lot of the great songbook came pretty much, it was, New York was kind of the home.
That was the heart.
It was the heart of the heartland. Well, the Tin Pan Alley, as they used to call it.
Right.
Up in New York
Right.
City. Songwriters would go off to New York. And I think Hoagy Carmichael and Cole Porter from Indiana both went that way.
Yeah. It was a song factory, that was essentially what it was. And the Brill Building was the later iteration of that in the 50s and 60s. Yeah. But, songwriters were in an office and their job was to churn out music, and they churned out music. And that's why I was, like I said earlier, there was a lot of crap too, but then
there's a lot of stuff that's been forgotten.
Yeah. But then, a lot of songs that, for whatever reason burst through and made it. So New York was certainly, that was the place, at that point. Although we like to talk about too, though, because people always ask us why we're here? Why is the foundation based in Indiana? And while yes, Tin Pan Alley was New York, the artists were from all over, and so the music doesn't belong to
just
one coast or the other. Gus Kahn was from Chicago, and Richard Whiting from Michigan, and Johnny Mercer from Georgia, and Hoagie and Cole were from Indiana, and so the music really does belong to the whole country.
Yeah, sure. And then what are some kind of briefly like tunes that would color an era from during this period? And we'll just use the 60s as kind of the end point.
Yeah.
From the 1900s. How briefly would you say, you think of the 20s and 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and then the 60s, and what would we be hearing in the 1900s?
Yeah. Well, in the 1920s, and we did an exhibit on this. One of our early exhibits was on 1920s big band.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and so certainly at that point you'd be listening, and really through the 40s, different kinds of big bands, vocal groups,
Mm-hmm.
And Indiana, oddly enough,
Glenn Miller,
Glenn Miller, Tommy Dorsey,
yeah,
and
Begin the Beguine,
right, exactly. The dance, that was a dance, so the dances, and then again tied to shows and movies
Mm-hmm.
too of the time. So you've got certainly White Christmas and Wizard of Oz were films. The Hollywood musicals, when that era came, that would have been the 40s, 50s, 60s. That became another avenue there were songs written specifically for movies. Mm-hmm. Then there were stage musicals that became movies. The
King and I,
Oklahoma, and Oklahoma changed that's considered a turning point for musicals.
What now? Why is that?
Because the songs helped move the story forward and became incorporated into the story itself, as opposed to musical reviews. Before that time, it was musical reviews, so it'd be standalone performances.
Sure.
Throughout. Oklahoma was really a game changer in how musicals would be going forward, and then that was the whole era of Sound of Music and King and I.
Yeah.
South Pacific.
And that really kind of lasted from the 50s to about early 70s.
Yeah,
late 60s, early 70s.
Early 70s, yeah.
Yeah.
And then
a lot of, I don't remember when Hello Dolly was somewhere around with...
Yeah, Barbra
Streisand and Louis Armstrong.
Yeah, directed by Gene Kelly.
There you have it.
Yeah.
Well, and he was, the Vincent Minnelli, the musicals that Gene Kelly did his dance and the dance and song thing.
Yeah.
Singing in the Rain and all of those.
Right.
That he was very well known for.
Oh yeah,
that's really fascinating. Well, that's good to know, and I think the dynamic of the musicals. When people discover music, I mean, we both in our own way have discovered music that's older music, but how do you keep that dynamic in the foundation? With education and basically you're going to have we'll talk about the museum a little bit, but please tell us about your programs.
Sure. So everything we do really comes out of our mission to preserve this part of history. So we do that in a variety of ways. We physically preserve the materials, and while our offices and exhibits are in the Palladium, we have an office building just down the street here where we house all of our collections. And so there we physically preserve the materials that are in danger of being lost. And then we have educational programs, outreach programs, exhibits, again, all rooted in that mission to preserve and educate. But again, finding ways to make it relevant and to bring music to where people are and what they need. So, for example, one of our longest running programs is the Songbook Academy, which has celebrated its 15th year this year. And that's a program for high school students. And it started as a local event. It actually started in 2009. So before the Palladium even opened, there were 2 years of the Academy, which people don't realize. A lot of our local fans don't realize. the first 2 years, the mission of that program was really just to get kids in a room and, expose them to the music in the hopes that they'll fall in love with it, like we all did, and they'll become our missionaries for the songbook. And it worked, and people liked it, and it was popular. And then the program went away while they moved into the Palladium and kind of restructured and everything. And that's when I was hired to kind of revive that program and expand it, is what my charge was. And so I, having been a singer and a teacher, and I had gone through programs, that were for young singers, I thought we could do more than just teach them about this music. We could use the music to teach them valuable skills, things they need to know. And so we created more of a performing arts intensive. So students come here, they get vocal health lessons and technique lessons from top teachers and singers across the country and arts programs. We bring in Broadway stars because we have a lot of kids that want to be Broadway actors. So we're bringing in Tony winners. We have Grammy-winning singers, songwriters. So they get a full, comprehensive, week-long education, master classes and workshops. What makes our program unique is that we focus only on the music. The music they sing is all music from this time, that the 20s to the 60s.
Yeah.
So a lot of these students want to be Broadway performers, but they only know Wicked or Hamilton. But they come here, they're singing Rodgers and Hammerstein and Cole Porter. And so that's how we fulfill our mission. And what we're really doing is fostering the talents of that next generation of songbook artists. These are the kids that are going to go on to write the next chapter of the American Songbook, to perform the songs that exist and will come. And so that's been an exciting program. And now we have enough history after 15 years. We have students who are on Broadway. We had students in several Broadway shows this year alone. We have students who are singers-songwriters, students who are film actors, directors, conductors. And so it's exciting now to see the fruits of those seeds that were planted years ago. And then we have another signature program called Perfect Harmony. And that program came about 7 years ago. And that came out of a time when we realized we were spending so much of our efforts trying to reach young people to make sure they knew this music that we were starting to neglect the people who remember the music.
Yeah.
And we wanted to make sure we had a program that served them. And then through a set of circumstances and situations that some of our staff members were going through, we ended up connecting with our local chapter of the American Alzheimer's Foundation. And they were looking for a music program. They had an early stage program where they would take folks with early stage Alzheimer's and dementia to museums and cultural institutions and things for outings, but they didn't have anything music related. And so we created this program called Perfect Harmony, which started out as an in-person program, and now it's in person. And then we create materials that can be shared with care partners. And it's really creating resources to help engage seniors through music. And
how does that affect them?
Well,
effect.
Yes. Well, science is now has now confirmed what those of us who love music and are around music have known for many years, that there is great power in music.
Mm-hmm.
And we now know that the music we listen to when our brains are developing, the early to mid-teens through the mid-20s, that music is imprinted on our brain, and it's the last to leave us. And so if you have had the unfortunate experience of spending time with somebody who is in the late stages of dementia, who may not be verbal, who may not be able to have a conversation, or may not be able to remember what they ate that morning or what they did last week, but you put on a song from that particular time in their lives when their brains were developing, and they may know every lyric of the song. And we saw that in real time when we started this program.
They start singing
it, speaking it. And we saw that early on in our program, and we realized the power, and that it was more than entertainment and just building community. There was, power to be had. And we're not healthcare professionals.
Sure.
So we engaged a music therapist to help consult with the program, to help create the materials in the program, so that we were really creating something that was the best non-therapeutic use of music. So I want to make that clear, that we are not, we're staying in our lane. Our lane is the music and the memories and the time, the context. And so we create materials every month with a different theme. So it might be In the summer, it could be patriotic theme. For holidays, your holiday could be love.
This is for the folks with Alzheimer.
Well, now we work with any number of people. We work with senior living facilities. So
Sure.
these can be community building resources. If you are caring for someone at home and you need an activity. If we do work with the Alzheimer's community, we work with Parkinson's community. Really, these are materials that can be used to engage seniors through music. And it's a whole packet of materials. You can use them in total or in part. If you're not particularly musical, we create music. We partner with and hire local artists to come in and sing songs, do movement exercises, all on video. So you've got a video playlist you can use. We'll type up lyric sheets, conversation prompts. Really, the whole program is designed to help someone who's with no musical experience to the person who is a professional musician to use this to really engage seniors through the music. And it's very powerful.
That's a very fabulous idea. And I've heard about that, but not to the extent that you're doing that in a program, which I think is fabulous, particularly people who are struggling with memory.
Yeah.
And even other people, I think that music can have a very powerful positive effect on, as they go on in life and in their memory. And that is fascinating. Well, I'll put the links for these programs and for the foundation in the description notes. And we'll hope that will help you out there and that will interest the folks who would be interested in that program. And because that can do, lots of people can help many, many people.
Yeah.
Because that's dynamic because you're working with the youth and with.
Absolutely. It's intergenerational. And also I'll point out too, the resources are free. And so we have I'll give you the link, but you can sign up for the mailing list, and every month you'll get in your inbox the packet of materials.
That's great. Thank you very much. And I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the collection.
Yeah.
Because I love music and I love museums. And can you tell us about, I'm sure you have, well, I know that you have lots of music.
Yeah.
You've got a lot in your collection. What can you take us through some of your favorites?
Yeah. Gosh, and this changes, every day because it's like a treasure trove. We have over 300 collections now of composers, lyricists, performers, a lot of archival collections and paper collections. So we have some collections like the collection, and this is one of my absolute favorites, the collection of Meredith Willson, who is known for writing The Music Man. If that's all,
Trouble in Water City.
Exactly. If that's all he did, he would have cemented his place in music history, but he was quite prolific before and after. He was a classical musician and composer. He played under the baton of Sousa and Toscanini.
Wow. Those were greats back in there.
Right. He wrote symphonies himself. He was he had his own radio shows. He was the head of the Armed Forces Radio. He wrote other musicals and film scores. So he was quite prolific. We have his entire collection, all of his papers, correspondence. The Music Man alone, he had many, many drafts of the show before he settled on the final version.
Because that has been like on high schools have performed that for since that it first came out.
It is just about always being performed somewhere in the world at any given point, and no kidding. And so we have all of his papers, and so we work with authors. So 2 books just in the last 5 years have been published on Meredith Willson that were researched in our archives. We worked with PBS on a documentary about him.
Great.
So that's what we do with the collection. So that's one of my favorites. But then we do have a lot of music, like you said. So we have the music libraries of Andy Williams, Sammy Davis Jr., Rosemary Clooney, Natalie Cole. So we have over 200,000 musical orchestrations and parts. And then we have some artifacts that are really among my favorites just because I just think the stories they tell and the way they resonate. My favorite right now, because it's in our exhibit gallery, is the piano of Harold Arlen. And Harold Arlen is a name that should be known and remembered by everybody. It may not be by younger folks today, but he wrote so many great songs that are still relevant and that are standards today, like Come Rain or Come Shine and Stormy Weather and Get Happy. And but he wrote all the music to The Wizard of Oz. And we know from the documentation we have on the piano and from his family who donated the piano, when he had the piano and what he wrote on it. And he wrote many of those standards.
Over the Rainbow.
Including Over the Rainbow.
Yeah.
He wrote on that piano. And there's actually a video in a documentary about him that shows him rehearsing with Ray Bolger.
Really?
He's playing this piano and Ray Bolger is dancing as they rehearse for The Wizard of Oz. So that's my favorite because so much of what we do, again, a core part of our mission is to reach young people because this history isn't being taught now and students aren't learning these things. And so we want to make sure they know this important part of our American history. But it's hard to do. It's a challenge to do when you're trying to make things relevant. This piano is a perfect example of something that every kid just about still watches The Wizard of Oz.
Mm-hmm.
Their parents grew up watching The Wizard of Oz, and then their parents who are still with us, watched it. So we've got 3 generations who can stand around that piano and share a memory. And that is a great way in for us to then explore more about this history of music. So that's one of my favorite artifacts. We just got another piano. They're not all pianos, but we got another piano recently that is really amazing, and it's a piano of Irving Berlin.
Wow.
So Irving Berlin wrote things like God Bless America and White Christmas, Blue Skies, and many, many, many great songs. But he couldn't read music. And
Interesting.
He could play on the piano only on the black keys. He could only play an F sharp.
So he was a minor kind of guy.
He was a minor kind of guy. Great. I'll use that. So he had a special transposing piano built, and he called it his Buick. And it's a piano that had a lever on the bottom. And so he'd play on the black keys. And then when he wanted to change keys, he would shift the lever and change the keys.
So you go into second gear.
Pretty much like a gear shift. And so, again, that to me is going to be, and we just now got it from the family of Irving Berlin. It's at Piano Solutions here in Carmel now being cleaned up and restored. But talk about something to illustrate, Irving Berlin was said by all of his peers. I can't remember who actually said it now, but something about Irving Berlin doesn't have a place in American music. He is American music. Like to write something like God Bless America, which, is sung and everywhere, even now, or something like White Christmas that continues to be, it really is, he is American music, and this piano will help tell his story, and it's such a unique story. And so I love anything that shows process, or that we can talk about somebody. And stuff. So those are my
that's a great story.
Yeah. And that's going to be on display.
One of the greats of American music.
Right.
And I remember growing up, it was, is it not? It's Rhapsody in Blue.
That's George Gershwin.
Yeah. George Gershwin. And not Irving Berlin, but George Gershwin. And see, before my time, they tend to go together. Yeah. But that was used a lot in advertisement. But Berlin's tunes were just so a part of the fabric of every day. That's when popular music became folk music, if you will. Yeah. And that's a great story, and especially shifting gears and changing keys and the way people process, because I would think that would help students who perhaps they have they read music backwards because something like that, or have something that could help them go into overdrive to adapt to do the music.
Yeah, or just to see that there's a way, right? Here's a man who couldn't read or write music, and he wrote some of the greatest songs, so it could be inspiration. Yeah. And then in terms of process too, we have a lot of collections of different lyricists, and so I love to see we have a notebook of Ira Gershwin's and his lyric writing, and you could see on each page he just wrote always, and so you can't identify what everything is, because he might have a rhyme sequence that he liked, or a phrase, and then that piece of it might end up in a song somewhere, but otherwise it was just his using
a log of lyrics.
Yeah, to see how
Prose.
How his mind worked, Or we have the collection of High Zerot, who wrote the lyrics to Unchained Melody, and you can see how the name changed and how different verses changed, and you can see his scratch marks.
The evolution of the song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, process. And so we have worked with students, on lyric writing. We had an exhibit on Gus Kahn, who was a lyricist, and we taught a lyric writing lesson there, which aligned to English language standards. So we worked with the teachers to have, basically they wrote a little lyrics to an existing tune. And so it was essentially aligned with their poetry writing exhibit. But again, using music and Gus Kahn, who otherwise, if we had tried to bring them in just to teach them about Gus Kahn, I'm not sure there would be, other than the fact that he's somebody who should be known, there wouldn't have been value to the teachers of this,
Exactly. Well, two personal questions for you. First one is favorite songbook tune.
I'm so bad with favorites, but I do, because they always change.
Well, then,
but no, I have
three.
Okay,
go for it.
I have one good answer because I think it illustrates what's beautiful about the lyrics and a lot of these tunes is they were clever and they were smart. And one of my favorite songs is a song called "My Romance," Rodgers and Hart. And it's one of the most beautiful love songs that never uses the word love. And so that's one of my go-to favorites. My Romance doesn't have to have a moon in the sky. My Romance doesn't need a blue lagoon standing by. So it's just beautiful lyrics, beautiful, beautiful love song that never has to utter. It's smarter than just
It's one of those clever tunes that makes it fun.
Right.
Yeah.
And in that similar vein, I think Hoagie Carmichael's "The Nearness of You" would be the
That's a great tune.
way, right?
Yeah.
Just what it describes and says, it's so much more powerful and impactful than just, "I love you."
Yeah.
It paints a picture
about being perhaps over the top.
Yeah.
It's illustrative.
Yeah.
And I think that's where its power lies.
Yeah.
It's more almost poetic. And he did that a lot with his lyrics.
Okay.
Second question.
Okay.
And this goes to recordings with music, is analog or digital?
Well, I mean, analog, we talk about this in the exhibit because we have different recording formats on display there. And, everybody talks about the resurgence of vinyl, it's, it's so much more. Yes, it's true. And there's something fun about, having a record and putting it down. But vinyl today is not, what you're hearing is still the digital recording. We're still hearing those.
It's digital on the analog.
There was something about the vinyl from, the 40s, 50s, 60s. When you heard that, you heard what was happening in the room in that moment.
Yeah.
In that time.
It's very, my favorite male vocalist of all time is Nat King Cole.
Oh, yeah.
It's just the voice.
Yeah.
And he was kind of before my time, but, I think he died when I was a baby, but yeah, he did when I was very, very young. But he had a great voice, but that whole Capitol Records recording, all those folks, it was very, talk about ambient. And they had those very, very fine, there's just so many kind of microphones.
Right.
And they just really pulled in the sound.
Yeah.
And
you heard everything in the room.
You heard everything, in the room. It was very, very big.
Right.
Whereas digital is, it's great for bass, but it compresses everything.
Right.
And if you just take analog and put it on a digital recording, it's going to shred.
Right.
Because it's just so big, it's going to shred that box.
Yeah.
And so I like them both for different reasons, but I think you're totally right about the analog because it really gives you the atmosphere. And when you listen to, and why I was saying Nat King Cole is because when you listen to those recordings from his era, it's like you're in the room.
That's exactly how I feel. You're there in the room. So when you hear the crackle or you hear a breath or you hear, you're part of it. But I agree with you. It's they're both, they're both good for different reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. Well, Chris, thank you so much. We could go on for hours talking music, but you've been so helpful. Thank you so much. And again, we'll put the links for the programs and for the foundation in the description notes. But also, last note, you are building a museum.
We are going to build a Songbook museum. It's been a long time dream, really, since the organization was founded, was to one day build a museum. And that became a reality in the last couple of years. And we just signed an agreement with the city of Carmel for a land, which is right across from where we are now.
Very nice.
So it'll be here, and we'll still, be part of this, wonderful community in the arts and design district here. And it's going to be an interactive museum. It's not going to be a little niche history museum. I mean, our job is going to be to talk about how this all started, that foundational of American popular music, but then trace the evolution of pop music. And so we want it to be a place where you can come and young people can come and explore and learn about their particular soundtrack and songbook, and then share that with their parents and grandparents. And so it'll be a place where everybody can come and celebrate their songbook. And it's going to be exciting.
Well, it certainly is a promise of it'll be a global stop.
Absolutely.
And we're looking forward to it.
Well, thank you very much. Well, again, with the links to our website and stuff, people will be able to follow the progress.
Well, great. Chris, thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it.
It's great having you. And that's it for today's episode with Chris Lewis. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Hotel Carmichael. We're recording today in Feinstein's, talking about Michael Feinstein.
That's right.
And we look forward to being with you on the next episode of the Omnibus Show.
If you enjoyed this program, please like, share, and subscribe to continue the conversation. For the Omnibus Show newsletter, please sign up at theomnibusshow.com.